And also there's often a pattern where he had a yeller in his life growing up. And so when the yelling is happening in his own wife, it sparks this fear. And he becomes afraid to say anything. And so here's what I want to say to the men. I want to say, men, if your women are yelling, they're yelling at you, they're yelling at your children, have a talk with them about it. You can be the Papa Bear, a compassionate man, a compassionate Papa Bear, compassionate husband, compassionate father, and you can say, now don't do it when she's in the middle of yelling, because that will not work. But later say, hey, sweetheart, I've noticed when you yell, it scares the kids, and guess what? It scares me too. Can we look at getting some help for that?
Hello world, it's me, Dennis, and today we are in search of the new compassionate male. I'm the producer of this podcast, and I'm here with the founder of the movement and the host of the podcast, Clay Boykin. Hi, Clay.
Hi, Dennis.
Well, would you introduce our guest and
Absolutely.
kick us off?
Yeah, Jeanette Hargreaves, welcome. It's so good to have you here with us today. Gosh, what I understand is you have a master's in divinity and you're a parenting coach. And we're going to get all into a lot of that. You've got a book that I'm dying to hear about. It's got a very interesting title. The title is The Day I Threw Banana Bread and Almost Went to Jail. True stories about how I used to lose my temper and how I learned to stop. Can we just start there? How in the world did you end up writing a book like that? There's got to be a big story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, first I want to say thank you, Clay and Dennis. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. And I'm excited about speaking with some compassionate males, some compassionate men. And I really consider myself a compassionate mom now. I didn't used to be so much. So I wrote this book after coaching people for several years about how to handle our feelings, even the feeling of anger, in healthy ways. Because I grew up in this household where when someone said I got angry, it meant I got upset, like I threw something or I yelled, where I lost my temper. And over the past few years, I've been on this journey. And by the way, it's not just me. Lots of other people are really beginning to discover this, that when you're angry, you can be angry and be helpful instead of be hurtful. And for me, when I discovered this, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to share this with the world. And for me, what it really boiled down to is I could stop yelling at my kids. Not only that, I could stop yelling at my husband. I could even stop yelling at my dad. So anyway, super excited.
Take it, Clay.
Yes, I can so identify with that because my mother's side of the family, her mother was born in southern Italy. My grandfather was born in Sicily. So we've got the emotion and that hair trigger. And I grew up with that was kind of the norm. If mother wasn't like this, fretting about something, we were worried. And when she was yelling, we were okay. But when she went silent, that's when we were really in trouble. But that demonstrative, how do you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the way you just talked about it, Clay, to me really speaks to how even though there might only be one yeller in the family, it's a habit that the whole family has, the whole family supports. So let's say that I meet someone in the community who wants to stop yelling, or even the spouse of someone who yells. no matter whom it is that's ready for the change. And by the way, sometimes it's the kids who are ready for the change. I can work with them and we can work on making that change in the family. Here's why it's a habit of the whole family. Because let's say one day that, Clay, your mom stopped yelling. Like you said, you were kind of on edge, right? Like,
Absolutely.
uh-oh, where's the yelling?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens at first, and like what happened to me when I first stopped yelling, is at the beginning, the kids kind of got more annoying. And even my husband at one point, he started yelling. Dennis, my husband, he said, well, you're not yelling anymore. And I said, oh goodness, no, family, I'm drawing the line. I'm saying we are not going to yell anymore in this family. It's not okay anymore. And now we're going to learn. The whole family has to learn a new way to do things.
Because one person triggers another. I can see
That's
that.
right.
And like gears, they're all you can't move one gear over here without everything else moving.
That's right. So it takes time.
Yeah, mother would yell and I would cry and dad would say, stop crying. And we just keep going around like that.
That's right.
So breaking out of that cycle, to break out of that cycle, because we're talking about on our In Search of the New Compassionate Male, what we're looking for is how does this new archetype arise in all of us, in men and in women? Because that divine masculine, we have the divine feminine and the divine masculine. How does it healthily arrive? How does it arise and show up? So to break these into places and to break it out into your own journey, can you talk about that journey to compassion through you?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, there's so many things that I want to say, but in a personal sense, first of all, I can tell you, I started out as a news producer working for the good old boys. And as a woman, I was actually frequently the only woman working either at a news radio station or like I worked at a local NBC affiliate for a little while as a producer.
Jeanette, ground us in chronology. When was this?
Yeah, so this is started when I was a teenager. And by the time 9/11/2001 happened, I'd actually been working in the news for 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Continue.
Yeah.
Well, that lets us know on the journey, because I'm 72, Clay's 66. And when we went through the process, women did not even have, when I was a child, women did not even have the right to sign a contract of their own. I mean, there's been such a shifts around, and including the times when you were the only woman in that room.
That's right. Yes. And there was a time also when it was considered acceptable to smack your wife if she talked back. Okay. So now I see, we got to the point where we said, okay, men, it's not okay to smack your wives if they talk back. And now I'm kind of part of the next step where we're saying, hey, moms, it's not okay to smack your children if they talk back. And in a lot of ways, I see this evolution happening is we've largely gone from or are exiting this time of great oppression for everyone.
Everyone. That's what Clay.
That's the key.
Right? We're all, everyone is oppressed. Everyone is wounded.
Yeah.
That's right. Like I think about my grandfather. He was a World War II vet with PTSD. He was an alcoholic and highly abusive towards his children, which included my dad. He had 7. And so once I became an adult and moved out of the house and really looked at my dad and his life, I realized he did the best he could.
Yeah.
By the light he could see by.
That's right. And that's what I truly, truly believe about everyone, Dennis. And to me, this is one of the most healing concepts, if you can get it to the depth of your soul that you have done the best you could.
Yeah.
You've done the best you could.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing the best I could when I was screaming at my kids.
Yeah.
I was doing the best I could.
You take that concept, and then something that I've become conscious of over the past few years is that we're all wounded. And, the whole patriarchy, and women are wounded. Of course they're wounded. But guys are wounded too in different ways. And it's not about comparing wounds, but some work that I'm doing with an organization called Gender Equity and Reconciliation International. We create that space where we can really see that we're both wounded. And that's a common point for us. That's common ground that we can then begin to build a relationship. So those two ideas of we did the best we could, and there's grace in that, and then be able to say, hey, we're all wounded. Or those are powerful together.
Absolutely. So then what do we do from here?
Right.
Because now, yeah,
Yes.
Go ahead. Dennis, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, please say more.
Yes. Oh, and by the way,
I was high-fiving you. I was sitting on the side. I was cheering you on, Jeanette. Come on.
And by the way, I'm taping this, so I'll be able to, clean up all my goofs.
Don't you dare. Now continue, Jeanette.
Life is messy.
Life, that's what, and even cowgirls got the blues. They have the guru. He says that. He says, life is messy, so eat it over the sink.
Oh, goodness, that's good. Okay, so I want to, first of all, Clay, you mentioned the word patriarchy, and this is something that I would love to talk to our audiences about.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes I hear the word patriarchy used as sort of a weapon against men,
mm-hmm.
to say, hey, men, it's your fault that life is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would prefer to call what we call the patriarchy the childbearing culture, because this culture that we've arrived at, where men are the protectors and the providers, they're expected to register for the draft when they turn age 18, and where women are, expected to be the homemakers and the child bearers.
Right.
Yes, it turned into what we call the patriarchy, but it's really, I want to say, it's nobody's fault. It's just what we created when we have a culture centered on children and childbearing. We needed the men to go out and catch the meat for the day, and we needed someone to stay at home and tend the fire and the children and cook the meals. We needed that. And now, and by the way, those roles in some ways have been a blessing, and in some ways have been really oppressive as well for both men and women.
Well, and it's been accentuated with the Industrial Revolution.
And private property. When private property and acquisitiveness, when acquisitiveness to have more than enough was more than what I would possibly need, became a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the patriarchy, I mean, we can trace that back, 1,000 years, but it seems like the past 80 years, it's been just accentuated. And right now it's just, staring us in the face, just really staring.
But this is the thing that I love about you saying, Jeanette, about let's remove blame. Because if we look at it as a system, it's not, this is a system. It's not something that we sit there that we create. Certainly we can either reinforce the system or help to change or to evolve the system, but it is a system. It's something that we were born into as to part of what we were. Now that we are here, now's our chance. What can we do about it? And because nature abhors a vacuum, what does a post-patriarchal world look like? What does a world where there's more compassion? What is the world when we are able to deal with anger in a healthy way, to use those emotions in a positive way as opposed to using a destructive way? I mean, a scalpel in the hands of a murderer will kill someone, in the hands of a doctor would heal someone. It's the same instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there were a lot of things that you said there. First of all, when you look at it as a system, you get to eliminate shame. So men, please stop feeling shame. And women, stop feeling like victims. When you look at it as a system, you can see how all of us are a part and all of us play a part, just like that family where there's a yeller, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we can claim our part and say, what changes do we want to see? And then work within our own capacity. So a lot of times, especially I think because I have my master's in divinity, people want to know what I'm doing as a leader regarding various issues, whether they're environmental or social or political. And Clay and Dennis, I always come back to the same answer now, which is I help moms who lose their temper.
Mm.
Because, right?
Thank you. Thank you. Because none, if we know anything at all about theology or spirituality, whatever, none are excluded. Nobody.
Yeah, what do you mean? Say more about that.
None. You are finding your ministry, your place, the things that you are to, and that is holy. That is as holy as it gets. We find what is ours to do and do it.
That's
That's what,
right.
Clay, you're teaching me
Yeah.
this all the time. You're teaching me with this. I watch you day after day go back to this, to look inside yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of attempting to change the world first, you work inside yourself first. And then you show me how to do it and the rest of us how to do it. And Jeanette, when you came to that decision, when you were going, wait a minute, I have to look inside myself first before I attempt to heal the world.
Yeah, and I would say that was a gradual
Mm-hmm.
realization that I had because I was so in the dark. But there's one story I have where my eyes really began to open. And it was the time when I screamed at my little girl over some bubbles, just regular bubbles that she poured out on the lawn. I screamed at her, I spanked her, and the next night when I went to put her to bed, she was maybe 2.5 or 3. And she said, dump bubbles out.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what she was talking about. And I said, sweetheart, I know I lost it and I'm sorry. And then the next day I sort of wanted this redo. Okay. So I decided we're going to play bubbles again, and she's probably going to dump it out again. Cause when I say I lost it, I mean, I really lost it. Like I screamed in her face. When I spanked her, I put her in timeout. I was very unkind.
I understand.
And so she dumped the bubbles out. And instead I gave her a kiss on the cheek and I just said, I love you, sweetheart. Mm-hmm. And Clay and Dennis, that night again, when I was tucking her into bed, she said, dump bubbles out. And first of all, I looked around. I was like, oh gosh, I hope my husband isn't hearing this, because I was so ashamed. I didn't want him to know how I had lost it so terribly. And I said, sweetheart, I know I really lost it. I yelled at you and I spanked you and I'm sorry. But the second time you poured the bubbles out, I didn't get mad, sweetheart. I'm trying to get better.
Mm.
And for 21 nights in a row, she said the words to me, dump bubbles out. 21 nights. So, from the mouths of babes, right? She knew it wasn't right. She knew it. And I think if that's something that's awakening in humanity right now, it's this knowledge in our hearts, this very childlike knowledge of what's right and what's wrong. And she knew that it was wrong and that there needed to be a change. And I see more and more people, even men too. I talk with
Thank
men.
goodness.
Yes. I'll stop right there.
Oh,
No,
please don't. We want to hear, tell us
please
about the
don't.
men.
All right, you talk about us
Yeah.
because we need to know. We need to know from your perspective because we will never know. Men will react differently around us than they do around. Each person reacts individually around every other person. But please give us your perspective, Jeanette.
Yeah, sure. So I talk with men because of what I do. Like when I go out to meetings, there are often a lot of male business owners there. And my phrase is usually, I help moms who lose their temper. I'm a parenting coach and author. That's kind of what I say very briefly. And so many men have come up to me and said, I have a wife who yells. She either yells at me or she yells at my kids. Can you do anything? And I say yes. And I have coached, one man is coming to mind in particular, who are afraid to say anything to their wives. Mm-hmm. They're afraid. First of all, they think, oh, my wife is in charge of disciplining the kids, and this is how she's chosen to discipline them. And so he lets it go for that reason. And also, there's often a pattern where he had a yeller in his life growing up. And so when the yelling is happening in his own wife, it sparks this fear. And he becomes afraid to say anything. And so here's what I want to say to the men. Mm-hmm. I want to say, men, if your women are yelling, they're yelling at you, they're yelling at your children, have a talk with them about it. You can be the Papa Bear, a compassionate man, a compassionate Papa Bear, compassionate husband, compassionate father. And you can say, now don't do it when she's in the middle of yelling because that will not work. But later say, hey, sweetheart, I've noticed when you yell, it scares the kids. And guess what? It scares me too. Can we look at getting some help for that?
That seems so easy. That seems so easy to say.
But it takes practice. But this is the whole about with having uncomfortable conversations, Jeanette. What I'm learning and continuing to learn is that I have to be willing to have them badly at first. Not to be articulate, not to have that perfect conversation in this, but to be able to broach and stumble and say and then go back and say, let me take another shot at that. Because one of the things that fascinates me is that I tend to out picture what's going on within me, so that if I need to have compassion or want to have compassion for others, I really have to work on this. How do I have compassion for myself? So when you went through that process with your daughter and went back to your own, how were you able to have compassion for yourself, to forgive yourself, to be easier on yourself? Because I found that the harder I am on myself, the more likely I am to repeat the exact behavior so could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Developing compassion for myself, it actually did start by developing compassion for my own parents, to see them and their stories, that they had done the best they could. And slowly, as I began to see my own parenting journey, I could see myself as well and say, you know, I did the best I could. And as I've been teaching people and coaching people, um, that has come forward as one of the most powerful messages. And honestly, as I have compassion on others and teach them, it helps me to have compassion on myself as well. And honestly, that is the biggest, um, that's how people heal. You know, you're right, because if you get stuck in guilt and shame and blame, you end up lashing out in one way or another. Yeah, you get stuck, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I used to go to sleep at night saying, that'll be the last time I lose it, knowing that I would wake up the next day and it would happen again.
Exactly. And how is that any different from any other addiction?
Oh, right. Yeah, sometimes I call it a stress addiction. Absolutely.
I hadn't thought about it like that. Well, I can so
identify.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because when you lose your temper, you get a hit of adrenaline, you know, and guess what? Your whole family gets it too. You know, it's kind of, I equate it to smoking cigarettes. So when you smoke cigarettes, you get a hit of nicotine, and you have a whole environment and habits, you know, daily routines that support that. Well, the same thing goes for losing your temper, especially if it's been ingrained in you since you were a young child. You've had this sort of daily hit of adrenaline for as long as you know. And so then even like me, I'm 44 now, but I was 40 years old and still craving that daily hit of adrenaline.
But were you consciously craving it, or was it because it was a byproduct of you yelling, right?
I mean, right, completely unconsciously. That's why I named my book what I did, because I could have called it Emotional Intelligence in the Family.
Yawn.
Okay, I'm going. All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's take another shot at that title, Jeanette.
Yeah. You know.
I wanted to help raise people's awareness because, you know, y'all, one of my reactions when I'm out is they'll say, oh, everybody yells. They'll just laugh in my face. They'll say, do you really not yell at your kids? Come on. And my claim to fame right now is that I haven't lost my temper with anyone since 2018.
Nice.
Well, now let me ask you a question though. When you say you haven't lost your temper, what's the difference? Or my first thought is, okay, so you're bottling it up. It's going to come out one way or the other.
So how is she channeling it, right?
How are you channeling
it?
What do you do with that energy?
Because we have to use that energy somehow. Right now, we're doing this digital taping on the 22nd of September in 2020. The country is going through a great deal of stress. There are these anger issues that are coming out on all sides of the political equation as we're going out. So there is a huge stress on the country. So can you talk globally about that too, and how we deal with events that feel like that they're beyond our
absolutely
ability to do something?
Well, first of all, mom rage is also trending right now because so many kids have been home for so long. When I sent out my press release, I said, mom rage is not okay. Here's how to stop it. And I really agree that any kind of rage is not okay. So the question is, what do we do with all of this anger? And, you know, some people, there's some programs called anger management. And I don't like the title anger management because what I teach is not about managing your anger. It's about using all of that energy to be helpful instead of hurtful. And let me tell you, when you can harness the energy of anger, you can build a whole business
Yeah.
with that energy. So I say, people ask me, what motivates you? I'm motivated by love for people and children. And I'm also motivated by anger, because once I broke out of the bubble, that yelling habit, once I realized that I didn't have to live my life that way, and there were so many people out there still stressed out, going to sleep, feeling guilty, waking up the next day, yelling at their spouse, yelling at their husband, I was angry. I was so angry, and I'm still, believe it or not, this is what anger looks like. It looks like this. It looks like me saying, hey, I have a book. I used to yell every day. Buy it. I mean, like, I am using my anger in a healthy way. And it did take breaking that habit, that adrenaline habit. So I did a lot of deep breathing. I prayed. I would catch myself in the beginning, you know, when I could feel that adrenaline rush coming on, and then get to the point where I could make a choice. What am I going to do?
You know, I want to go back to what you were talking about earlier. You said, well, I studied what my parents were and how they were. And so what that means to me is that in my doing that work, I was able to forgive myself. I was able to say, oh, there's a bigger story. You know, some of this came through the genes. And now that I understand that, I can make a choice and I can choose a different path. It's hard to get, you know, down that path maybe, but but now I have a choice, and it's not out of shame. And I think that's really
Yes.
powerful.
Absolutely. Do you have a particular story, Clay, of like a moment when you were able to let go of the shame, or a rock bottom moment when you realized that you wanted to do things differently?
Oh boy. I don't know that I can go there. Not that I don't want to, but I just can't speak it because it's so deep in me. And I love that question. I wish I could articulate it. Maybe later on I will.
And we will,
Yeah.
because this will be something that we'll talk about, because we need these
Wow.
these moments when 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 I can see well, it's amazing to feel the um, the the opportunity, and this is what's so fun, Jeanette, because I will tell you this. What I was doing was giving Clay space. I was yabbering because Clay was going to be able to get there,
I'm
because
there.
I know this and love this man, and he's there.
Awesome.
Okay, so bear with me. Mother became so angry at my sisters, and I don't remember which one it was. I was probably in 5th grade or 6th grade, that she said, okay, I'm leaving. And I went into her room. I said, don't leave. And she pushed me away. And it was right there that I became the peacekeeper for the family. I would do anything to keep the peace, to a fault. You know, peace at all costs isn't necessarily helpful. But that was the moment. And, you know, I hadn't thought about that until you just asked that question. Thank you.
That is why, one of the reasons why I love you, Clay, is the depth of your willingness to go into and show me and show us who you are. I grew up so much in a life of facades, of feeling that I was, that there was something wrong with me, that I was having to live up to something that I wasn't, and that discontinuity, that discrepancy ended up causing all kinds of emotional angst in there. And it isn't until I was and the work that I've done with you and the coming that those two things now are the same. They are now my internal and my external reflect each other so that I can show up as authentic. And that is one of the great part of this In Search of the New Compassionate Male, is that we can show up as our authentic selves, as our mothering selves, as our female selves, as our nurturing selves, as our compassion. We can show those aspects that were not nurtured as the archetype, as the stereotype.
Yeah. The rest of that story was she didn't leave. She didn't leave. Yeah.
And yet you retained the peacekeeper, that role that was way beyond your emotional place to do, and you ended up taking it right into a heart attack.
Yep.
At the age
53.
53.
And I can map that all the way back to there in how I got through school, my time in the service, my corporate time. You know, I've trained myself, and people will say, "Well, Clay, you're so calm." Well, yeah, outside I am, inside I'm not necessarily. But that's been a lifelong piece of work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you have an event like that, you kind of end up detaching yourself from your feelings because you're working so hard to hold the family together.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, there were years when that emotion would come up in me, and my only way to control it, and I hate to say this, but this is the truth, I will never be like Mother. I will never be like Mother. And now, the most creative part of my being is my mother. And when I look at my hands, when I'm doing whatever it is that's created, these look like Mother's hands. These are Mother's hands. How could I push that away? So I've gone from I'll never be like her to I finally come around and said, no, I am you and you are me.
We are all, Jeanette, it's so lovely to see the space that you hold. You hold it for us to be open and to be what a gift you are to do, because I could see you opening and allowing the conversation to flow and tossing it back and forth. What a beautiful gift that is, that you've worked so hard to develop.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And honestly, it's my honor and my ministry to do this work. My book's called The Day I Threw Banana Bread and Almost Went to Jail. And I've had 3 interviews like this with 3 different women, all of them who brought up in the conversation that they threw something in anger.
Yes.
So one woman opened up, said she threw ketchup, which she doesn't recommend because it's a mess to clean off the ceiling. Another woman talked about how she threw a block of cheese. And another woman talked about how she threw a cell phone, which she did not recommend because it's expensive.
Yes.
So we laughed about it. So my work opened up that conversation. It helped to break down the shame. And then the next question after the yell, after we laugh about how we lose it, is always, so what do we do? And Clay, your story is just so touching to me. I want to go back to it for just a moment, because you talked about this moment from your childhood where this relationship with your mom got complicated. Mm-hmm. And then you skipped all the way forward to the present, where obviously you have a different kind of emotional relationship with your mom now. And in some ways, I would say you forgave her. Mm-hmm. So do you have a moment that you can remember when you felt that forgiveness for her?
Boy, you can ask some hard questions. The first thing that popped in my mind was I oil painted when I was a kid, and I decided I wanted to start again. And I was single at the time. I was in between marriages. And a friend of mine helped me get all the oil painting, all the oil paints and so forth. And I began oil painting, and I loved to paint the face and portraits. And it was one day when I was doing a study of the girl with the pearl earring, I couldn't get her to come alive. And my friend said, put the gleam in their eye. And when I did that, she looked at me. And I felt like I'm an artist, and Mother was an artist. So we had come together at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, you could see yourself in her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This can be pretty tough, but I'm feeling inspired to do sort of an archetypal apology for all the mothers out there, and maybe even all the fathers, the ones who've yelled, maybe the ones who've passed, who've died, maybe even they're still around and they're still yelling, they're still out of control. And here's what I want to say to those of you who've been yelled at, who's been smacked, who's been whipped by a stick or a belt or a boot. And it is, I'm sorry, darling. I love you. I don't know any better. I don't know how to handle my feelings in healthy ways, and I am deeply hurt. You may or may not be able to fix me, sweetheart, but I want love in your life. So you go and you find people who love you the way we wish I could.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Mm.
What that rocked me down to my core, because for many reasons, but one of them being that anger shows up in many forms, and rage shows up in many forms. I've seen rage come out in deep silence and complete withdrawal of emotions and withdrawal of that can be, I mean, it has many faces where it isn't malleable and growing and learning, and so this is the healthy place that we're getting to. This is the healing. Thank you for that beautiful apology on because it helped me to forgive myself, and it also helped me to forgive the forgive everything that did not happen in order to support and nurture me when it could have happened. And also for the opportunities that I did not take when they were presented to me for healing.
You're welcome.
Mm.
You know, I've wondered about my kids' own healing and my kids' forgiveness of me, because they remember. They can remember when I used to lose my temper with them, and they know what it's like now. And the whole family talks about it on a regular basis, about how we want to be and who we want to be as a family. And I was driving with my son in the car this weekend, and let me tell you, it was hard to drive while he was having this conversation with me. He said, "Mom, why don't you tell all the stories of the times you lost your temper in your book?" He said, "Mom, yeah." And
just not the ones that are dressed up in the pretty little packages that we want. How about all of them?
Yeah. And first I said, "Sweetheart, I could fill a whole other book." And I said, "I tell a few stories because I think they'll be helpful and life-changing for people. But the other times that you remember, I remember too. And those times are also not okay. And I'm sorry about that." And in particular, he recounted a time when the kids were in the bath and they splashed water everywhere. And I became rageful and I spanked them. And he said, "Mama, it wasn't okay when you spanked us." And I said, "No, sweetheart, it's not okay to hit kids. It's not okay to hit anyone." And then he also said, "And it wasn't okay for me to crawl up to you to get spanked." And I said, "No, sweetheart, you're right. That wasn't okay."
Wow.
It's not okay the way we hurt each other. It's not okay the way I have been hurtful. And yeah, that's where we are right now. It's messy.
Yep.
Conversations are messy, but let me tell you, I wouldn't want it any other way.
Jeanette, that's what I think that is so important about our conversation here in the United States, and what we've been having on race, and what we've been having on gender, and what we've been having, and why it's so important to talk about it is because if we don't talk about it, if we don't bring it up and bring it out with our warts and all, we cannot heal. It will be papered over. It will not really, we won't look at it, and we have to do that, because how else is your son going to learn what does forgiveness look like? What is the messy, arduous, difficult, incremental work that requires for forgiveness to happen? How can he do that unless he actually sees it and experiences it in real time?
Absolutely. Well, and how can we all create a safe space for these conversations to happen? And number one is we learn that self-composure. How can we maintain our own composure? Because let me tell you, it was a bit hard to maintain that composure when my son had that conversation with me. But because I was able to hear him, and I didn't get defensive, right? I was able to acknowledge his experience and what he was saying.
It's really interesting. As you said, composure, maintaining composure. Dennis, I can't remember in our circle, ours is a contemplative circle. It's a safe space. Nobody's judging anybody. Nobody's trying to fix anybody. We hold space for one another. I don't recall us ever talking about composure. It's not in my book that I wrote. It's not in any of my notes. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I talked with mom yesterday. She was actually working on my shoulders because this stress habit, y'all, it's not just a habit of the mind, it's a habit of the body too, right?
Of course.
So this mom, I happened to bring my book with me that to the appointment, and she saw it and she said, "Is that your book?" She said, "I've read a parenting book on parenting and technology, but I've never read a parenting book about stopping yelling." And she said, "I need to read your book." And there are parenting programs out there called conscious discipline, positive parenting, gentle parenting. And there is a whole segment of the population that says, yes, I ascribe to positive parenting, and yet they've skipped over this step of maintaining your composure. So you could have this parent that still claims to be a positive parent, but they haven't learned number one. It's like I said, it goes back to creating this safe place in your home. I'm going to go ahead and go on and say step 2 is what I call emotional intelligence, feeling your feelings in healthy ways. And that includes feeling the feelings in your body. Like a lump in your throat means you feel sad. An upset tummy means you feel nervous. This means you feel stressed out. And then here's step 3. Identify values, your personal values and the family values. Because once you feel safe and loved with your feelings and your composure, that's where you can really problem solve by identifying what's important. And guess what? When you interview people in the United States about our values, that is one place where we really agree. So we've got to get through these first 2 steps, everybody. Let's let's feel safe. Let's maintain our composure. Let's feel our feelings. And then let's get together where we're truly united, which is our values.
This is the opportunity. This is where I think that we've got the opportunity to make a difference by hearing one another, seeing that opportunity, understanding that that we're not going to do this perfectly. That there's going to be my wife and I, fortunately, because I'm an actor and I have this, I get an opportunity with her to say, wow, can I do another take on that line? That line I just said, I really need to just do another take on that. And so I actually will step back and I'll come back and I'll say the same words with completely different tone and then she's done so much work on herself and so much that she allows me the opportunity, rather than my having to go through this entire spiral of, oh, I'm just so low, I can't believe I said that, go through that entire spiral. We cut to the chase and go, let's do another take on that.
Oh, can we just do another take, right? Yes. I love that. Yeah. I call that the redo. Dr. Becky Bailey calls that take 2.
In our circle, we call it do-overs.
Yeah.
There you go.
Give me a do-over. Yeah.
I need a do-over on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupted.
Well, is there anything in the last couple of minutes that we haven't talked about, Jeanette, that you would like to make sure that we get on this particular conversation with you?
Well, if you would allow me, I'd love to talk just for a minute about how people can find me.
Please. And and it's going to be on the link.
Oh, good.
Everything, your biography, will be on the link, as will be a link to your book, of course.
But
Okay,
please,
perfect.
please
Yes.
go
So
ahead.
I'll just share my website. The easy link to get to it is kind of funny. That's why I'm smiling. It's Temper Coaching. Tempercoaching.com. If you want to find
Nice.
me, that's the easy way to get there. I love to speak to groups. I love to work with people. This is my ministry. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me for any reason, even if you just want to have a brief conversation on the phone.
Thank you both. And Clay,
Yeah.
what a holy time, the three of you. The setting the intention for us to exit the conversation at a higher level of consciousness that we entered it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was especially powerful to me, this idea of forgiveness around our parents. And then it emerged so appropriately, forgiveness around your mother, Clay.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, can you imagine people who watch this? My prayer is that people who watch this will get to go on that journey of forgiveness of themselves and their parents.
I did.
Absolutely.
It happened to me. It happened to us. So wish granted. Clay?
I'm complete. I'm wiped out. That's what I am.
That
This
was
was
wonderful.
fantastic.
Thank you for taking us, Jeanette. Thank you for taking us to all the places that you did. Thank you for being this wonderful, both a facilitator and a contributor, and to being and holding up, being with us all the way as we learn and grow, because both that is where we are in search of the new compassionate male, as men who are willing to grow, who are willing to continue to have that beginner's mind and to move into that place. And we do that, and you so graciously and humorously and lovingly brought us there, and inquisitively. So thank you. Clay, thank you so much. And everyone, we will see you next time on In Search of the New Compassionate Male.